The dusty road stretched long and lonely that morning, as if the whole town had forgotten the cries of the hungry. A young woman walked slowly, her shawl pulled tightly around her thin shoulders. In her arms, a small boy barely 4 years old clutched at her dress, his cheeks pale from hunger. The woman's name was Clara Mayfield, and though her spirit had once been bright, it now bore the weight of sorrow and want. Her husband had been gone for nearly a year now, taken by a fever that spread through the mining camps. Since then, Clara's world had narrowed into a single desperate purpose, finding enough to keep her child alive. That morning, she had walked into the town of Willow Creek with only one hope, that someone would spare her a few coins so she could buy milk for her boy. She stopped outside the general store, heart pounding, pride warring with need. The townsfolk bustled about, ladies in fine dresses, men with polished boots, children laughing with sweets in their hands. Clara swallowed hard. "Lord, give me courage just for today," she whispered. When she stepped inside, heads turned. Her dress was faded, her shoes scuffed. She felt every eye on her, though none stopped to offer help. With trembling fingers, she approached the counter where Mrs. Dobbins, the shopkeeper's wife, stood. "Please," Clara's voice cracked softly, "I only need a little milk for my boy. Could you, perhaps, spare a bottle until I can work to pay you back?" Mrs. Dobbins pursed her lips, her eyes traveling from Clara's tired face to the child clinging at her skirt. "Clara Mayfield, I cannot give credit to every widow that comes begging. If you've no money, you've no milk. That's plain." The rejection stung, but Clara bowed her head. Pride burned inside her, but hunger was stronger. She stepped back outside, tears threatening, when a deep voice broke across the street. "Ma'am, are you in some kind of trouble?" Clara looked up. Across the road stood a tall rancher, broad-shouldered and sun-browned from hard days of work. His hat shaded sharp blue eyes that studied her with concern rather than judgment. By his side stood a little girl, no older than 6, clutching a rag doll. The child had hair the color of spun gold and a smile so warm it could melt stone. Clara hesitated. She had learned not to trust pity. It often came with whispers behind her back. But her boy tugged at her hand, whispering, "Mama, I'm so thirsty." The rancher crossed the street with steady steps. "Name's Luke Granger," he said gently, touching the brim of his hat. "This here's my daughter, Sarah. You look like you've had a hard go." His gaze softened as it landed on Clara's son. "What is it you need?" Clara's lips trembled. The words were simple, yet they seemed heavier than stone. "Just a few coins for milk, sir. Nothing more." Luke studied her a long moment, as though weighing her honesty. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver coin. "You don't need to beg for it. Go get the milk. And if you're willing, maybe you can come by the ranch. My Sarah could use some company besides cattle and horses." Before Clara could answer, the little girl tugged at her father's sleeve and whispered loudly enough for them all to hear. "I like her, Papa. Better than all the ladies who come around." The words startled Clara, and her eyes filled. She turned her face away quickly, not wanting them to see her weakness. But in that moment, something shifted, like a door opening to a place she thought she'd lost forever. Luke's steady voice broke the silence. "What do you say, ma'am? Could you come by tomorrow? I've got plenty of work in the kitchen and house that could use a good hand. And Sarah here, she seems to have made up her mind." Clara looked at her son, who was already clutching the milk bottle Luke had purchased for her inside the store. His eyes shone with gratitude, and her heart ached with the weight of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Granger," she whispered. "I'll come." Luke tipped his hat, while Sarah skipped in a circle, her doll bouncing in her arms. And Clara, for the first time in many months, felt the faint stirrings of something she thought hunger and sorrow had buried forever, faith that life might yet hold kindness. The next morning dawned bright over Willow Creek, the sky painted in strokes of orange and rose. Clara rose early, her son still sleeping curled on their narrow bed. She brushed her faded dress as best she could, smoothed her hair, and tied her shawl across her shoulders. There was a nervous flutter in her chest. She had given her word to Mr. Luke Granger, and in her heart she knew she could not turn back. The ranch. The Granger ranch lay just a few miles from town. Clara walked the distance with her son at her side, their feet crunching along the dirt path. When the wide stretch of land came into view, Clara gasped softly. Acres of golden pasture rolled out in every direction, dotted with grazing cattle. A sturdy white farmhouse stood proudly against the sky, its porch wide and welcoming, with a rocking chair swaying in the morning breeze. Sarah, the rancher's little girl, came running down the steps when she spotted them. Her blonde hair streamed behind her as she shouted with delight, "Papa!" She came. Luke followed, tall and steady, with his hat tipped back on his head. "Morning, Mrs. Mayfield. Glad you found your way." His smile was brief, but it carried warmth enough to ease the tight knot in Clara's chest. "Please, just call me Clara," she said softly. Luke nodded. "Then Clara it is." He glanced at her boy. "And what's your name, young fella?" "Eli," the child answered shyly, hiding behind his mother's skirt. "Well, Eli," Luke said with a grin, "there's a barn full of cats out back that'd be glad of company. Think you might like that." Eli's eyes lit up, and when Sarah tugged his hand, the two children ran off together as though they had known each other all their lives. Clara watched them with a mixture of relief and amazement. Her son had rarely laughed since his father's passing. Work and comfort. Inside the farmhouse, Clara set about helping Luke with the kitchen. She scrubbed counters, swept floors, and washed dishes, her hands moving with practiced speed. Luke had clearly been managing on his own. There were unpolished boots by the door, a pile of laundry in the corner, and dust gathering where no one thought to look. "You've been doing this all by yourself?" Clara asked, surprised. Luke chuckled. "A rancher can mend fences and rope cattle just fine. But keeping house," he shook his head, "that was my wife's way. Been hard since she passed." Clara froze. She hadn't expected to hear that word, wife. She turned, eyes soft with sudden understanding. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Luke nodded, his jaw tightening briefly. "Sarah misses her something fierce. I reckon that's why she took to you so quick." He met Clara's gaze then, steady and unflinching. "And truth be told, I don't mind it either." Heat rose in Clara's cheeks, and she turned back to the sink. She had come here only for work, only for coins to feed her son. But standing in that warm kitchen, the smell of bread baking, Sarah's laughter spilling in from outside, Clara felt something shift within her, like roots slowly taking hold in soil. Sarah's confession. By midday, the children came tumbling inside, cheeks flushed, hands dirty from play. Sarah ran straight to Clara, wrapping her little arms around her waist. "Will you stay, Miss Clara? Not just for today, forever? I like you better than all the other ladies who come by. Papa says I shouldn't say such things, but I don't care. You're the best." Clara knelt, smoothing the child's hair, her throat tight. "Sweetheart, I can't promise forever, but I'll be here as long as I can." Luke stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. His expression softened at the sight of Sarah's wide smile. Later, when Sarah and Eli dozed in the parlor after lunch, Luke spoke quietly. "She's right, you know. Folks come around here, ladies from town, even widows looking to settle. But none of them ever lit this place the way you just did." Clara shook her head. "Luke, I came here asking for coins. I've nothing to offer but work." He stepped closer, his voice low. Sometimes work and kindness are more than all the riches in town. For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. Clara's heart thudded painfully, afraid of what hope might rise if she let it. A place of belonging. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Clara gathered Eli's things to leave. Sarah clung to her hand, pleading, "Come back tomorrow, promise?" Clara looked at Luke, uncertain. His answer came with quiet certainty, "We'll expect you here. Every day, if you're willing." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "Yes, I'll come." On the walk back to town, Eli clutched her hand tightly, his little voice full of awe. "Mama, did you see? They wanted us there. They wanted you." Clara swallowed hard against the tears threatening to fall. For the first time since her husband's death, the ache in her chest loosened just a little. And though she had walked to the ranch with nothing but a plea for coins, Clara returned home with something far greater, hope that she and her boy had finally found a place where they might belong.